Hi, everyone. Carl Steinbeck here. Just want to cover day two real briefly on the Massachusetts versus Karen Reed second-degree murder charge against her there in Dedham, Massachusetts. And today was a good day for the prosecution again. Overall, they really scored some major points against Carrie Roberts. Carrie Roberts was not finished yesterday, so she came on today, more direct examination by Hank Brennan before she was crossed by Mr. Alan Jackson. And Mr. Jackson scored some really good points on her. He basically was able to show that she was very much majorly influenced by Jen McCabe. So Carrie Roberts, who was very close to John O'Keefe. In fact, they go way back. They even were like dates at high school prom, but just sort of Platonic type dates kind of thing. But she was so much involved in his life. There's something that's really, I think, something that's not been explored by the defense, which I think the jurors in their minds are probably thinking that some of them anyway are probably thinking like I'm thinking. It's like there's something really different here, because here you have a married woman with a couple kids, and she's basically really helping John raise this niece and nephew of his, and going to the house many times. And as John O'Keefe's mother, who testified today, she sees her all the time. So don't know if that still continues after John's been killed, but in any event, she's so much involved in his life and has had such a long history of it that I think there's some issue going on with her and Karen, and that's something that I think the jury can pick up on. I was hoping the defense counsel would sort of explore that and show that she has never liked Karen, because Karen is sort of so different, because Karen is not a mom with kids and in a marriage. She's basically a super successful, super sharp, well dressed, how should I say, professional in downtown Boston. There working for Fidelity Investments with a high paying job, drives a new fancy luxury SUV. So she's got a lot of things that really don't comport well with John's other friends, like this Carrie Roberts. So I can definitely see some jealousy there going on, and I can see that Carrie Roberts would look at Karen Reed as an outsider, trying to interlope and interfere with her ongoing relationship status, as being a key one to help out John raising his niece and nephew. So I think that could be, even though that wasn't explored on cross-examination, I think that's something that jury's going to pick up on. And one of the things I always look for in any case I'm handling is motive. Motive is the key for me to winning most all the cases I've won over the decades I've been trying cases. And this particular one, this was, like I say, a friend of John's, but a friend of John's doesn't mean that necessarily they're a friend of Karen. So I looked at it as being sort of like, so her testimony can be jaded by her dislike of Karen. And then if you combine the fact that she didn't really know Jen, so it's like, well, how does Jen, saying she loves John in trial one, she said she loved John on direct examination, she just blurted that out, that she loved John, also a married woman with 4 kids. So you sort of have these 2 married women that are sort of like doing all this work for John and raising these 2 kids that he took on as his niece and nephew after his sister and her husband died. So it's just sort of like, it's almost like a communal type setup. And so anyway, it seems sort of really strange. And then you have this dynamite cross-examination that came out through Alan Jackson, where he basically showed that Carrie Roberts was not honest in her testimony, that she was very much influenced by Jen McCabe, of all things. Jen McCabe, and mind you that, she was influencing this Carrie Roberts before she had a grand jury testimony, to the extent that she was testifying to a timeline that Jen McCabe helped set up, which supposedly was at the request of John O'Keefe's mom, which really doesn't make any sense. And it's like, wait a minute, isn't the cops supposed to be the one that's doing the timeline and interviewing people? And so this whole setup between Jen and Kerry just doesn't make any sense. And you saw the way Jen was trying to influence so much of what was going on that night that John died and the next days. And then when you circle back to if Carrie Roberts says she didn't really know Jen McCabe, it's like, well, they both seem to be so much involved in John's life. So why wouldn't they know each other? It's just sort of really doesn't add up. So I would say that the relationship there, definitely there's something off. There's something odd here. And I just really have the belief that if there's a male and female in a relationship, there's always, and it's supposedly it's platonic. I don't believe it's ever really platonic. I always believe there's one of the two parties has a romantic interest in the other. So I think that's sort of been played out here, and it's affecting how they're acting now towards Karen. Obviously, Karen was always the outsider with John, no matter how much she was serious with them, how much they had going on, and how much they got along. There's always a fact that there was going to be an issue with, like, is Karen helping out with the kids going to school? Is Karen helping out buying their clothes and doing different things? She's obviously got a lot more money than what Kerry can pitch in. So maybe Carrie Roberts is only pitching like gas, picking up the kids from sporting events or school and stuff like that. So, and then think about also that they're out running around without their husbands there early that morning, 5 a.m. You know, they're at 6 a.m. They're out there, and their husbands are still sleeping in bed. So the whole setup is just really bizarre. And so I think that I think that's coming across to the jury very well. And I thought when we saw the direct exam from Hank Brennan this morning with Carrie Roberts, there were so many minutes played of the trooper's car cam showing the front of his car pulled up to the back of Carrie Roberts' SUV, and then you could not really see it. It was all blurred to the left where supposedly John was laying in the snowy area. But that house of Brian Albert's, it was just so ominous. It looked really creepy. It looks like a haunted house, basically, the way it was all dark. And so I thought what Brendan was trying to do is he basically was using a lot of time just to talk and ask, well, who's moving where, who's that we see now, and then Carrie's doing her best to say, well, that was me, and then you can obviously see Karen because she had her long hair, and you could hear her screaming and running around and being very upset. The only one that seemed very upset about John's condition, I might add. So I think that what Brendan was actually doing is help draw attention to the house. It's like, why is that house dark? And why isn't anybody coming out? And so I wish they would have brought up that on with Carrie Roberts saying, did you know this is the house of a police officer? Did anybody look into the house? Did you ask Jen McCabe why she's not going into the house, and things of that nature? And so keep in mind, this is Jen's sister in the house. So imagine if you pull up to your sister's at 6 a.m. in a semi blizzard, and there's a dead body in the front lawn of somebody you love. You're not even going to go like rush in right away, knock on the door, tell the police to go find out if they're okay. Your sister and her husband. The whole thing is just really creepy, weird, and so it's like they got something to hide. This is what I've been saying all along. These parties act like they got something major to hide, and they got a dead man on the law, and they act even stranger. So this whole process where it came out that Jen McCabe is calling, and I knew this was going to come out really interesting and very, very much a good point when Jackson asked her, when's the last time you talked to Jen McCabe? It was like this morning. It was this morning. Of all things, Jen McCabe has so much control in trying to make sure timelines and testimonies are aligned that she's actually calling her that morning. Sort of like the Wendy Adelson. She just couldn't help herself but monitor testimony. And so you got to ask yourself, what's the motive to do all this monitoring and controlling and policing of testimony of witnesses? I mean, she's monitoring testimony. It seems like even more than the prosecutor is. So what's there so much? Why's there so much out there about people having to get their stories straight? Right? You don't have to worry about getting your stories straight when you're just telling the truth and you got no agenda. If the agenda is just, hey, tell the truth, what happened? John O'Keefe, great guy, and this is what happened that morning. And anyway, we heard more about from Carrie Roberts about this issue about the lights and what she saw about the tail light coming up when she pulled up there at One Meadows where John O'Keefe was at. And the tail light of Karen's car was punched out. And she made it out to be, it sounded like she's making out to be much bigger this time than she did the first trial. And keep in mind, the first trial that she mentioned it was more like a smaller hole. The description was totally different. You know, she's also talking about some metal sticking out of the back of the light or something. It just didn't make any sense. I wasn't really clear of that. And so it looks like she was embellishing her testimony some. And again, it's just sort of like that motive and the connection and the division she had with Karen, no doubt the division and I would say jealousy of Karen. So yeah, and then like she also was cross-examined and it was brought out she's had 50 contacts with the DA's office. 50 contacts since the death of John O'Keefe. That's a lot of contacts. She even contacted Morrissey before, and she's also contacted the state trooper's office, Sergeant Buchanan, and main person she contacted was Steve Nelson. He's a victim advocate there. So anyway, all this contact and whatever, and then I see she's on Good Morning America talking about how she wanted us to be on there, and she's on there with another friend of John O'Keefe, a male friend, wanting to let it be known that we can't lose sight the fact that this trial's about John O'Keefe. So it's just really, really odd behavior for her. Keep in mind also, yes, as Linda Mon saying, this is the one that Jen McCabe had to really worry about because she's a talker. She's very much telling them everything as she texts the group chat folks that when the troopers were interviewing her and she's eavesdropping in the next room, keeping a close eye on what she's saying. So keep in mind, Jen McCabe's the one that's got the eagle eye looking to see what's going on, whether John O'Keefe has shown up the night of the after bar party at the Albert's house, has it constantly looking out the window to see if he shows up and texting him and calling him, except for that window, supposedly when Karen Reed's vehicle struck him and took him out. So anyway, the thing about this whole light thing and it's now a bigger square, and it sounds like she's trying to line her testimony with the way it looked at the Sally port. So she has a really malleable memory and testimony. And so if you got her having contact with Jen McCabe, things definitely be changed. And I thought it was interesting in revealing when it was brought out on cross that she has reviewed the videotape from her previous testimony. And right away then, who knows what happened? The judge calls a sidebar. The judge does not want any previous testimony, testimony coming out about previous video out there on this that this witness looked at. It's totally legitimate line of questioning, but my theory behind that is a judge doesn't want to tempt the jurors to look at YouTube and find out what other testimony was and then compare it to this one. So it's something that the prosecution did not object to. It's perfectly legitimate line of questioning. So prior statements then were just brought up as transcripts, not on actual, not brought up on actual videotape. The fact that she sat in the prosecutor's office and they went over her videotape testimony. So anyway, so as it turns out, going back to this issue of what was said in the vehicle, it said what she said in the grand jury was that there was she actually made it sound like she overheard Karen asking Jen McCabe to make the Google search for hypothermia. And as it turns out, she never heard Karen ask that at all. It was just something that she heard from Jen McCabe, and then she adopted that in her own testimony for the grand jury. So it's actually false testimony. Alan Jackson called her basically, you're lying. You were lying then in front of the grand jury. And she says, well, it wasn't really a lie. Technically, I guess it was. But she tried to backpedal all that. But I think even more than the points they scored, that this witness is got some motives to not come clean as to this case. She's also heavily influenced by Jen McCabe. So I think that was one of the key time factors on this one in day two. The day two takeaway for me is Jen McCabe is even influencing Carrie Roberts up until this morning, mind you. And then I was actually driving to the airport with John, and I said, I guarantee you she's going to say, I just wanted to wish her good luck. And then we heard the next question was like, why were you asked? Why did you call her up? Just to ask her, tell her good luck. And I'm like, that's so typical. And it's like, really, you got to offer her. Why would she need good luck just to say whatever? So I think there's been a lot of conversations that we won't know about. And so anyway, the testimony, yeah, about Jimmy C. You're saying that metal piece that Carrie Roberts was saying is a taillight plan to see that hit John's arm, explains the mark. Yeah, that doesn't explain any of these marks at all. It's absolutely ludicrous. What kind of metal is in a taillight? There's no metal in these taillights. So to mention that metal thing, very strange. Mel, you're saying it's thought this witness came across very unusual, very combative. Also, she also did the eye squeeze. She did the eye squeeze several times when Jackson asked her, so you wouldn't lie under oath to the police, right? And she squeezed her eyes shut. So there's a lot of that eye squeezing by these prosecution witnesses, I noticed, when you ask those kind of zinger questions. And Josh, you're asking, thank you. You're asking if the witnesses are under sequester order. How did Jen know Kerry was testifying today to wish her good luck? Because there's the victim witness coordinator probably let them know what that was about. And they're not, it made it, the way it came out with Hank Brennan, he made it look like it was totally normal for witnesses to be talking to each other. And I'm like, what kind of prosecutor wants witnesses to talk to each other? Never gives them a warning. Hey, don't be talking to other prosecution witnesses. We want to keep your testimony independent. So even the prosecutor's making it look like, hey, it's not a big deal to be talking to other witnesses for the prosecution. And so my whole thing, when I've been a prosecutor, I don't want witnesses doing that, because you can have their testimony be shaded by influencing from other witnesses, and it's not really their memory, but their memory of sort of with the gaps filled in by another witness's memory. So you want independent witnesses. You don't want that kind of the influence. And even the prosecutor, Brennan, objected to the line of questioning when Jackson was trying to bring out about how how she could be influenced, and just generic things about being influenced by having other people talking to you and rehashing what happened. So anyway, so I thought all that was really good to impeach Carrie Roberts. Elizabeth 2024 is saying Judge calls Kerry Albert. I didn't catch that. So that's interesting. So yeah, so what this really did is, I think it helped set the scene. I wish they would have asked those, like I say, those questions about anything from like, hey, do you see a dog at the Albert house there? Did you know another cop was across the street? Did you see any law enforcement officers come out of their houses? I'd sort of like play it up like that if I was doing a cross on these witnesses. I know it happened later on with Unetti and that EMS worker at the end, Whitney. Jim, you're asking how can O'Keefe support people who clearly had something to do with their loved one's death? This has always bothered me. I mean, just to disrespect the way John's body was treated out there, and it's like it wasn't any sense of urgency by law enforcement to treat this as serious as they should have. And one of the things that I was talking to my sister, who's a retired RN, and she'd mentioned this on the chat before. But when they talk about the core body temperature of John O'Keefe, she mentioned that there's a thing called the endotracheal tube, a ET tube they call it for short, and there's a specialized tube that has an added temperature probe on it. And she said that all ambulances should have this specialized ET tube on board. At the bottom, you can see that. She's saying it's a good estimate for body temperature. And in other words, your tracheal temperature is a good indicator of your core body temperature. And after intubation, which is putting the tube down to the trachea, you would connect a specialized ET tube to a monitor, and you should get the reading within seconds. So we haven't heard that come out at all. So really, they didn't have that kind of equipment. And so I'm thinking that, maybe it has to do with their massive salaries where, if the cops are making 230 to 330 some thousand a year, the leaders of the Canton Police Department, then maybe the firefighters are in the same boat where they're making so much money on salaries that the equipment is sacrificed. So I wonder what the real story on that is. Lindemon and Jen micromanaging Kerry's dialogue. Yeah, it's totally like, say, a great setup for Jen McCabe. And I was wondering today, is a prosecution, if they play that 911 tape, I dare them, because I think they realize that it looks really bad for their case. It looks so suspicious the way Jen McCabe's acting. And so they sort of, maybe if they do play it, they want to bury it in between a lot of witnesses. And so that's also very suspicious. And it just shows a consciousness that they really got issues with their case, and very much huge, massive reasonable doubt factors that are going to be before this jury. Every day there's more reasonable doubt that's being presented. There was also some testimony that was brought out on a video clip with this interview with Gretchen Voss about the Taillight, and Karen was talking about how she was trying to do stuff to pick some pieces out of that and pick it off the driveway of John's place. It was not really that. I didn't think that was big a deal. Margaret O'Keefe, John's mom, she testified she was not cross-examined by the defense. In fact, they were very respectful of her. Jackson actually went up and said he's sorry for her loss, and he said he didn't have any questions. So that's a very classy, professional move there, showing her dignity and respect. And then there's a couple other video clips that were played outside the presence of the jury, and initially, and then there was not an objection to the first one, a 2020 interview with Karen where she's discussing a visit to John's parents. And then there was another video clip where she's sort of like doing a mocking of John's mom, the way she acted, and said, it looks like you've been hit by a car. So that one's still under review by the judge. She's going to let him know later. And I believe it's Friday morning. She's going to let him know where they can bring that one in. And then there's also a MSP, Massachusetts State Police Officer Trooper Giano. There was no cross yet by Alessi. They reserved the right to call him. Then there's a Daniel Whitley. He was crossed by Yannetti, so he's the one that had some connection with Kerry, and he actually made some comment about rebutting what Karen was saying about Carrie Roberts is not somebody that's part of a support structure. And Karen was concerned about who's going to take care of the kids. What if John's going to not make it, and that kind of stuff. So anyway, it was is overall, like I say, the main witnesses for the prosecution are getting gunned down, and they have really starting out. This is your first 2 days of trial, and this is really all you got. And there's some statement of the state, whatever statement you have for Karen. I think when you align those up, some of them may not make total sense. Some may sound a little bit like they're incriminating, but I think when you go over all the scientific evidence, you understand that she's also been somewhat spoon fed what happened by Jen McCabe initially, and all the other evidence that came forth in the days, months, and whatnot after this case was further evaluated. That it's really not an accident, and so I think she just doesn't recall what happened, and then she's got the issue of suggestibility. And so when you have somebody like Jen, you didn't know that they could do something like suggest different scenarios, then you can get your facts wrong. So they have to prove more than just Jen admitting something. They have to do they have to look at the actual forensic digital, and have a theory that actually makes sense. That's not just some kind of like story that just is almost outright laughable to think you can spin that car. Now they keep changing this timeline. They keep changing the distance that she drove in reverse. They're probably going to change the speed, maybe to who knows what. But that car with those snowy conditions could not drive back that fast. And for John to not be able to know a car's coming at him, and even how what would spurn Karen to even want him dead? So secondary murder charges, it's a sudden heat of passion type intent to murder. It can happen in a second like that. There's no premeditation, but why would she snap like that? There's no indication there's any fighting. They were lovingly in the bar with each other, having a good time. So I think for them to basically say that Karen goes from having a nice evening with John to suddenly becoming a raven maniac that wants him dead, it just doesn't make any sense. It's so overcharged. And I can tell you, there's law enforcement types I've talked to. They send me messages, and they also say, I've never had anyone say, hey, look, you're wrong on this, that has law enforcement experience. We're talking about people with 20, 30 years on law enforcement force that say, hey, this is so wrong. This is no case at all they have against Karen. Nobody else would be prosecuting this. But when you have some political agenda and you got the political will and you're willing to waste taxpayers' money, then I would say that anything's possible. If you throw your principles out the window and you're willing to spend money to pin something on somebody else, think about it. She's looking at life. She's looking at life. Would be eligible for parole in Massachusetts, but she's looking at life over something that they're saying is basically a hit and run. And then for a basic hit and run, they got 150 witnesses to call. I mean, this thing's going so slow. And so anyway, and yeah, there's that motion to restart the trial to June 1st. And so they can try to rebut, the prosecution can try to rebut the ARCA new tests that they're performing. And as I've said before, the judge is just absolutely doing everything she can to bring up some kind of technicality to keep the ARCA witnesses completely out, and just not limiting their testimony to what happened last trial. But if she keeps them out, she's thinking that's her best chance to help throw this case and get Karen convicted. And it's pretty despicable and disgusting to see that. Brit Chick, you're saying, does it bother anyone else that Carrie Roberts talked to law enforcement, whether being Morrissey, Buchanan, or Proctor, over 50 times? Yeah, it is very, very much an odd thing. And it's almost like she wants to, this is like her 15 minutes of fame. And that's why, she's going on Good Morning America and all that. And so anyway, just very strange behavior. Lawn Lit, you're asking, what do you think of Hank's pretzel logic consciousness of guilt? Yeah, he had consciousness of guilt on one of these videos when Karen's talking about her I think that was the one with her mom, the mom of John O'Keefe, and she was saying that she sort of talked her angry and said, "It looks like he got hit by a car," and so Karen's like, "Whoa." And so she just started imitating her mom. I think that's the one. And I thought the consciousness of guilt was pretty weak. And so who knows what the judge is going to do? But you know what she tends to do is try to help the prosecution. So fierce like Frida, you're saying you think the defense is leaving breadcrumbs for the jury and Proctor and Jen McCabe. The jury will be waiting for their testimony. Do you think the Commonwealth will be calling Proctor or just the defense? It's going to be very much a an issue if they don't call the lead investigator, the lead detective on this case. And so it really looks like they got something to hide if they don't call him. So I would think they would call Proctor. And that right there is going to be a fireworks display because wow, the kind of stuff they have on him. You don't see that kind of dirt on a lead investigator, especially on a murder case before. Rainy day girl, Jen was in that car whispering to 911 during an emergency for somebody she loved. Yes. So there's a whole lot more that's unsaid that the jury is going to see through that. John's custom saw behind in the live, but did Jen go into the house? Brian still didn't come out. She went in like much later. So much later. It's sort of like after all the law enforcement had left. That's when she decides to go in. Sort of like, hey, the coast is clear. We got rid of these people, is what it looks like. Sandy, you're saying that Kerry said that Jen wasn't in the car during the 911 call. The wind was howling and Jen was not outside. She was in the car. The lies are out of control. Yeah, I mean it was it was interesting how Jen is inside the car and she's not running up the house to tell him what happened. She's not making sure CPR is being done. She knows CPR. So Cindy Edwards, you're asking, can I explain the throw up on John's boxers that had to happen inside? What do you think? Well, I think it could have been leaked through his whatever jeans or pants he was wearing. So it could have leaked through to his boxers. So that is a possibility. If you do get head trauma, then you can have that. Um, you can vomiting is an issue, but I do think it sort of shows that he's probably still standing up or somewhat maybe his body position was maybe such that he's being carried maybe by all fours with his back to the ground. You know, one of the things that I thought was interesting also is that through the testimony of Kerry, they never asked whether, I should say, Brennan never asked whether John was on his face or on his back. Because keep in mind, we got a discrepancy. Jen was saying they flipped him over on the 911 call, and yet Kerry's saying, making it sound like he was on his back, but it was never clear which side he was on. It never totally came out through her testimony today. And I think it's definitely something that shows that prosecution knows they got big credibility problems right out the gate with their two key witnesses, and we haven't even got to Jen McCabe and Proctor and the others. Just Dove, you're saying I wish the defense would start off questions to law enforcement paramedics about how much their treatment rendered that night would have changed if Jen McCabe would have made it clear that to 911 officer down. I think it definitely would have changed their mindset for sure. Yeah, I think it would have been a huge difference. But I do think that they won't be really wanting to admit that too much, because they would then be looking like they didn't do enough to help John, right? So I just don't think they're going to really go down that road and admit that. But I get it. I totally think that that's exactly why Jen didn't sound the alarm and shout that many times. We got a down officer. We got a police officer that's laying in the snowbank here. It's not a snowbank. I shouldn't say that, but laying in the snow there. Linda Ortiz, wouldn't the dog be barking up a storm with all the police, EMS, firefighters, people who were at the house? Unless they move the dog, beforehand and took care of that problem. Ashley, now you said his body's at 80 degrees. That's what I recall being at his temperature at the emergency room, not at the site there. Kelly, you're saying, will the Birchmore case come up with Garino? It might. I'm not sure, but I think it's fair game on cross examination if it does become relevant. And think about it. Garino's the one that said there was no text messages between Birchmore, who was murdered by that police officer, and the feds took on the case because Canton basically covered that up. And there was 30,000, yet there was 30,000 emails / text messages that the same Massachusetts trooper Garino failed to recover. So part of the reason why the actual feds came in and swooped in and got that case, because the cop was clear they ruled it a suicide, and that's kind of job Morrissey's office does. Absolutely disgusting. Lockout 999. I deal with cars. The taillight's mostly hard plastic. There's no metal that can cause that damage to John's arm. I agree. I've never seen metal in any kind of taillight. So maybe they call somebody in rebuttal to say there is no metal in the taillight. That's what I'd do. If it was my case, I'd call somebody like you and confirm. Call somebody from the Lexus dealership or the Lexus body shop. Normally you don't have a Lexus body shop, but somebody that does Lexus SUVs and can say specifically there is no metal parts in any of these. Now you might have a little metal part of the light bulb, but the fact is that now I'm thinking they're all LEDs. So really, is there any metal in these taillights except for the wiring? Certainly the wiring is not something that would do the kind of damage that we had with John O'Keefe, as well as the hard plastic. Men called Clay says none of the men came out there. Yeah, none of the men drove with the two women, Kerry and Jen. None of the police officers that lived on both sides of the street, the lawn there where John O'Keefe was found. Nobody came out, despite all those sirens and the lights flashing. So I think that really sat well with the jury when they can see that it looks like a haunted house there, 34 Fairview, all dark, has this eerie vibe about it. Sam, you're saying that the judge said you can step down, Ms. McCabe. I mean, Ms. Roberts. That's a good one. Ellie SB, you're saying no. The judge says thank you, Ms. McCabe. When Carrie Roberts was done. Either way, okay, that's a great one. And they're lockout 999. You're saying there's no metal in the 2021 Lexus, not even in the taillight housing. It's fixed with plastic snap in part, not metal. It's a bald face lie. Yeah, so And that's how you can another way to prove that Carrie Roberts is not telling the truth. If she really thinks she saw plastic, yeah, right. And a desire for civil discourse. Thank you, sir. You're saying I assume the dog left with Allie and Colin and stayed elsewhere, hence no barking and no biting when Jen burst in. I have no evidence for that, but no one investigated. That's one of the theories going around. I agree with you there. So, Jojo, you're saying you've been a claims adjuster forever. You wondered if Karen's auto insurance was involved and what they did to pay a death claim to John's family. I guess not, since there was not even an accident report done. Yeah, there wasn't an accident report, but do you actually need to? Could you have the fact that she's criminally indicted for murder? So, not sure about that. Leah says Carrie Roberts was on the defensive, thus her behaviors. What do you guys think of Hank Brennan so far? How do you think he comes across? If you guys were on the jury, how would he come across to y'all? Murray said yes, love to Grace cross examination. It's bittersweet. Said her talking over him and asking him questions remind me of Jen trying to control the narrative. Jen's definitely her mentor. Gary Rubner, can you grade Brennan for us, Carl? He's completely proven that he didn't watch the entire first trial. I think that I think he's got so much pressure because he's hired to win this case, and that's why he's trying to do all this stuff to keep out ARCA, keep out the cop Easter to testify for the defense. So he is willing to forego a conviction just to get a that sticks, just to get a conviction. So he doesn't care how much of the constitutional rights are trampled on. He needs to keep out the evidence that exonerates Karen Reed. And when you get a short-term prosecutor like that, it's hired for one case. They're going to go for broke. They're going to do a lot of stuff, a lot of shady stuff that a normal prosecutor would not do. And when you got a judge that is mostly a complete rubber stamp for running a roughshod over the Constitution, that's exactly what we have here. Mardella Rowland, the second EMT was Canton, incestuous as well, the one who was there for Karen's trip to the hospital for psych eval. Yeah, I mean, he lives close to Carrie Roberts. So, Jam, you're saying funny how a taillight can hit someone so hard you not break the bulb. Ellie, you're saying, wish Alan had asked the judge to instruct her not to speak or mumble over him. She'd answer and then add more when he followed up. Annie Lavelle, can Roberts get perjury charges? No, because they don't do that kind of thing there. Anybody's willing to say anything against Karen Reed, they got the golden seal of approval. Sam Poop, how would Jen even know that Kerry would be on the stand today? I mean, if they could have the witness coordinator basically tell witnesses what lineup they're going to be or something like that. So that's something that I think is possible. But anyway, Jen's got some insider knowledge somehow. So that's something they need to ask other witnesses, not just Carrie Roberts. How much has Jen talked to you? Straight out of Canton. I'm sure it's in their timeline, so she's repeating that in their way. Her and Jen have the same storyline, where that they have to get together and figure out it's a story of Karen had fessed up to hitting them 3 times. All right, jumping down. Tall glass. The judge wanting the ARCA on Friday. But yeah, she ordered them to have to be there, which is just absolute ridiculous. This judge is out of control, unbelievable. They're going to try to ambush him on some kind of technical garbage and accuse him of colluding with the defense, and it's really disgusting because you know what, these ARCA folks, they're like the best in the world. They're world class. The most significant research that's done by DOD, VA, NASA, places like that, professional sporting leagues, all of them use these ARCA experts to get the right answers. And you got this joke of a prosecutor calling these guys basically like they're just some backwoods bumpkins. Just shameful and disgusting that this guy has that kind of power to slander these guys. These guys should have killed the case. Instead, what they're doing is trying to make him out to be some kind of quacks. But in the end, you guys can see how corrupt Massachusetts is. I don't know why anybody want to live there after seeing all this corruption. Why would anybody want to live in a state like that? Christine, you're saying it very suspicious that John's ring camera does not have a recording at the time that they were exiting. It got deleted. They're trying to blame Karen for that. Trooper Proctor deleted that video. How do you even delete that video? What kind of knowledge would you need on that? How would Karen even know how to do that? Does she have any kind of training in computer stuff like that? I sure wouldn't know how to do that. Man, you're saying Hank says everything is conscious of guilt. Yeah, I mean he's going to wear out at this jury. I tell you that. Going so slow as he is, trying to question witnesses as slow as he is, he doesn't get it out. I thought the fact that he brought up how the kids were affected by John's death, the niece and nephew that he took care of. I thought this is not a sentencing victim impact thing. I wish the defense would have objected because that's totally outside the scope of what you bring in the case in chief on a murder case. Yeah, bring in all the testimony of how this murder impacted people and how it ruined their lives and caused all this hardship for them. That's not relevant in the actual prosecution of the case unless you get a conviction for victim impact. Evelyn Santos, yes. Alcohol was the whole culprit in all this. Alcohol does affect a lot of cases. I can just tell you from thousands of criminal cases I've had, you would not believe how much alcohol is a major factor in everything. Unbelievable. Way more so than illegal drugs or even prescription drugs that are abused. Kelly, you're asking, will ARCA witnesses be prevented from testifying? Could that hurt the defense if not allowed? That's what the good judge is gunning for, even more so than the prosecutor. because they just blow this case out of the water even more so on the reasonable doubt. There's nobody more qualified than them to say that Karen's vehicle did not strike John O'Keefe. Nobody more qualified in the entire world, I would say. Cindy Edwards, you're asking basically, have ever seen a judge like this judge? Canoni, she is so incompetent. Your thoughts on her, and do you think she's a disgrace? Look at some of my videos on it. I've talked about it. I think she's the worst judge I've ever seen. You really couldn't find a more judge that sort of like is setting up a defendant to get basically a rigged conviction. I think this is not incompetent so much as there's an agenda here going on that you can't be that clueless on the Constitution as a judge. As many years you've been doing criminal law, I don't believe it. You have to know you're trampling on the Constitution with these whacked out rulings you're coming up with. So yeah, I think this whole courtroom's a disgrace. I'm not going to mention the judge. Personally, I don't know what her motives are, but there's something affecting her ability to give fair and just rulings. Call it like it is, balls and strikes. You're like a referee or an umpire in a sporting event. You don't have any skin in the game for agendas on who's supposed to win. And so this is an absolute embarrassment and stain on the entire state of Massachusetts, and in some respects, even a wider area than that. And so, can you have out of control judges in other states? Absolutely. But normally you're not going to be seeing that kind of stuff on a live stream. So, rainy day girl, Kerry has herself digging in the snow to reveal John like he was in a foot of snow covering him. Yeah, I thought that was a little bit weird. And like I say, they didn't bring out whether he was face down or whatnot. She said all that snow was on his face, so that indicates, I guess, that he was on his back. But that's not what Jen said. So they can't get their story straight. And I think think about it, if they're trying to like make it look worse for Karen, then the more snow they say that he couldn't find a body there, the more it looks like, how did Karen know that he was over there? We didn't see any body there. It's like, yeah, really? How could you not see John laying there as you're driving up around 6 in the morning? Dust Dove, you're saying regardless of how the tail light looks or how it broke or if she cracked it, the science is still no collision. Yeah. So the jury needs to know that, but the judge doesn't want this to come out. That's my prediction. The judge is going to find a way to basically blame it on the defense attorneys and say that ARCA was in on it, on trying to deceive the Commonwealth from getting their fair trials. Come on. So it's so ridiculous. Ellie Epsby, you're saying any options for Alan Jackson to respectfully call the judge when she cuts him off? What she did to them today when he caught Kerry was so infuriating. Well, I think that they need to stand up to this judge. If it was me, I'd call her every ruling. I'd renew my motion to challenge her bias and prejudice and lack of neutrality. And so just continually build a record on that. I think they're getting more aggressive. I see Unetti today asked for a sidebar. They didn't do that in the first trial. So you need to like call it what it is. Just the way she's always moving around in a chair and sighing and just acting like, don't listen to the defense, jury. This is just a waste of time. You know how much she's always making the defense cut him off. No, we don't have time for this. We don't have time for that. And the prosecution, they just take their slow time, show videotape, and just sit there and just play it and not have anything of really of substance that that is helpful to the government anyway. I do think it's helpful to the defense. So I was happy to see that, but the defense is constantly being cut off at the knees, and it's just so absolutely atrocious and a disgrace to see that going on. Buttercup 203, you're asking, I was looking for you for a live today. Are you not covering every day? I'm not committed to covering every day during a live stream the whole day. That's a lot of commitment. I mean, you're looking at probably 2 months. I don't know that I can take listening to Brennan all day long. So I thought that was something else that they could have asked about, EMS folks and stuff. It's like about, did you see the dogs around? Were you the guys that cut off his arm? Did you see the dog bites on his arm? Even if they didn't, just to ask those kind of questions. Kelly saying, if Karen is acquitted, then does that case stay open? Could someone else be tried for his murder and cover up? Yes, you could change your theory of who did the crime, and you could go after the perpetrators, but you're not going to get that out of the Morrissey-led office. They're never going to give this up as saying Karen did it. So it'd have to be somebody else like the feds. Fierce like Frida, how Brian Albert and White didn't notice the lights and screaming noise and whatnot. Yeah, the one thing I noticed also the videotape of Karen when she's being interviewed, and they play those up there, and they got like 3 images of her saying the same thing simultaneous. Looks like different camera angles. I would I would object to that because I think it's sort of like, what are they going to do? Show like 20 big screens of Karen talking? It just seems really odd. It's like they're trying to engage in some kind of over the top salesmanship of it. Yeah, Dmart, that's another good point. Carrie said she called the DA's office after being prompted by Jen. Then she said it was about 4 times. Then she reported back to Jen. So Jen is even using her to call to find out the scoop on different things for Jen's sake. Savannah, why is Hank allowed to show these videos when they're taken completely out of context? Well, that's what I would do. I'd object and say that you need to play more of the video and show different context. Would it matter with this judge? I don't know, but I would not stipulate to any of them if they're going to show this a 10-15 second clip or less than that. I'd make them show more, or at least object and say they need to show more of a conversation. Although some of it, the conversation may not be directly on point, but at least show more of the context. Another monotream. Kerry tried very hard to spontaneously introduce witness intimidation. Yeah, I don't know if she's one of the ones that has an attorney. I think she might be the only one that doesn't have her attorney there when she's testifying and consulting, because I don't think anybody's looking at her as a suspect for the defense. So that's why I don't think she's even bothered to hire an attorney to advise her. Tall Glacier saying, do you think she was told to blame it on Proctor? So that's why she was asked who wrote that report. Yeah, I thought it was weird that she asked who wrote the report. So you may be onto something there. Yeah, there's your other question. Same thing. Okay. Yeah, I think that might be something to be said about that. Lem, I am Kendra official. Yeah, the weather was so bad, but their husbands let them drive by themselves in horrible weather. Really? Yeah, I mean, this is like, I, I said that from the get go. Where's their husbands? There's a storm and some officers missing. And yeah, honey, you can go out. You can drive around town. Go ahead. Hopefully, you'll make it back. Metro Monotream, you're saying issue with Proctor's not calling me equals instant reasonable doubt, but calling is a metric ton of reasonable doubt. I mean, they're in a catch-22. Either way, they're damned with either calling Proctor or not calling Proctor. It looks like they're hiding the ball. Sherry D. Carrie Roberts was a middle spokesperson for the McAlberts. Kerry living on the other side of town always wanted to be part of the in group. Kerry's finally getting the spotlight. And John is, oh gosh. JM, you're saying if we didn't know any better, it was just an emergency, a random guy passed out on some random person's lawn. Yeah. It wasn't a life and death situation at all. Cindy Edwards, can Proctor plead the fifth? Well, he's looking at easily being prosecuted for civil rights deprivations and abuses by the feds. So maybe he has his lawyer there too. I bet you he has his lawyer there. And so that'll be something if he invokes a fifth and they haven't given him immunity. If I was a lawyer, I'd ask for some kind of immunity before you testify. So maybe Morrissey will give him some kind of immunity to be able to testify and not be prosecuted. But think about it, Morrissey cannot protect him from the feds going after him. So if you're a lawyer for Proctor, the feds aren't going to give you immunity just to testify in a state case. So he's always going to be exposed to federal prosecution, even if Morrissey gives him some kind of full immunity. And I doubt there's any kind of like state law comparable to the federal one about civil rights deprivation, unless you want to say obstruction of justice. I guess they could always say that. So maybe they'll give him a immunity card to be able to use for protection from obstruction of justice, but I don't see the feds granting him that. Sherry D. Jen McCabe was caught on dash cam sneaking, quote unquote, into the house. Well, most of us saw it for the first time during trial one. Leah, you're saying I think the defense should ask Jen why she didn't knock on the door to make sure that her friends were okay inside the house. I would think that they do that, really grill her on that. Ellie, you're saying I think when Jen went in the house was when the plot to frame her started. I think they left him and were going to say he left and they didn't know and use the blizzard snow plow narrative. Hank the Pander, Brennan. And Carrie Roberts was lawyer shopping day. Too bad all the good attorneys in Boston are already hired by the McCabes. Dupree Shelburne, it would say that when the EMTs removed John, there was grass underneath him. Is it possible he was laying out there before the heavy snowfall or absence of snow due to his body heat or non-heat? I think that's a possible scenario either way. He didn't have a lot of clothing on, and so his body temperature would probably the have the ability to keep whatever snow was on the ground there covered. So the timeline could go either way. That's why I think his core body temperature there at the scene before he was brought to the hospital is really crucial if we can know that. Tall glass, I wish AJ would have asked her, did she see 47 pieces of tail light? That's another good one. Sam, you're saying my thoughts on Kerry's statement that Jen was doing CPR. Well, there's no indications that Jen was ever doing CPR, so that's really bizarre. Cindy Edwards, nothing is going to happen with the judge being fined or removed. Unless they impeach her, I just don't see this happening. But more than her needs to go. Morrissey needs to go as well. But I mean, you're talking about centuries of corruption up there. It's just not one or two people. It's many people involved in corruption from the governor's office on down. Sue Vanna, you're saying you're a longtime RN. He vomited due to the fatal head injury with bleeding and increased pressure in the brain. Vomiting is often a first sign. So, Vanna, what do you think of the injuries to John? Is that consistent with a car and especially his arm? Dog discussion. Why did Karen's lawyer let her go in 2020? I wouldn't allowed it. And it's just, there's just too many things that can go wrong. So I think most any criminal defense lawyer would say, don't do that. There's too much downside, not enough upside. Christine, what are your thoughts on Brennan sending the defense's PowerPoint at 10:45 p.m. last night? He was planning on using it today to question Trooper Garino. The book was 195 pages. I mean, they can do whatever they want. The judge doesn't care. The judge doesn't care. Boy, if that was something that the defense team did, gosh, you'd be ripping into them, accusing them of being unethical. And what about the reciprocal discovery timelines and all that? So it's just such a disgrace. Kelly, what if the shoe has 5 unidentified male DNA samples on it? Suspicious? Yeah. Why don't they get it sampled by the folks in the house? Why don't they do a comparison, DNA comparison? Sam, you're saying can and will Attorney Reddington, Jen's attorney, have her plead the fifth? Thank you. I think he could, but I think as long as they got the prosecution in her back pocket, believing anything she said, they even used her bogus timeline and throughout most of the first trial, then changed it up in their closing. So it's just so shady and underhanded and fighting dirty. Sailing Spinks, it's creepy how they've all claimed better memory of time. Yeah, I've never seen that before. That's a classic maneuver to impeach somebody, saying, "Oh, so your memory gets better over time," and nobody, of course, believes that. It's absolutely so ludicrous. But you have witnesses that'll say it. We already heard that from two prosecution witnesses yesterday, one yesterday and one today. I'm Kendra Official. What is Kerry touching John's phone evidence? Yeah, it's really bizarre. I would have grilled her on that as well. Monitoring. Jen had to downplay the severity. She had to make sure John would be dead for certain. Salem Spink, my mom's a nurse of 30 plus years and can't believe they didn't get John in the ambulance immediately. I don't get that either. I was just talking about that today to Leslie. It's like, how did they not get him in the ambulance like right away? It's like it wasn't a big deal. Even when they moved him on the stretcher, it's like they were not really rushed. I bet you if it was officer down, they would have rushed it a whole lot better. Christine, she's not checking on her sister. That house is completely dark. If that was my sister, I would check on her. You know what I also would do? Here's the kind of detail I go into on criminal cases. I would find out how often does their house completely dark. I find it odd that their house is entirely dark. There's no yard light on. There's no interior lights on. My gut tells me that that's probably the only night they don't have any lights on. And what does that tell you? They knew something was going down. Yeah, Yanedi asked the firefighter if the homeowner came outside. EMT said he's on his back. Yeah, but they weren't the first ones there. So, yep. Again, not checking on her sister and her husband. Thanks, Linda. Mon. Folks, when you burn the taillights can have chrome looking. Well, that's true. There's some chrome, but would you call it actually metal? She called it metal, so maybe that was her mistake. But doesn't it fit well to make it look like, hey, that could be how the injury happened? To say it was metal. Kelly, you're saying question, Carl. Can you please explain what constitutes a hostile witness? Carrie was awful, and Jen will be worse, as will her sister, based on testimony last year. A hostile witness is somebody that you're calling as your own witness that then doesn't cooperate and starts basically backpedaling or being untruthful with you. And so I've had that happen as a prosecutor before. So you basically start. Uh, you sometimes may need permission from the judge to treat as a hostile witness, but like when I was prosecuting a co-defendant who was ordered to testify in another case, an assault case, and I remember I had to treat him as a hostile witness, and I remember the guy actually exploded on the witness stand, started screaming, and smashed a pointer down on the ground. So that was definitely a hostile witness, and he was my own witness. He'd already been convicted of assault, felony assault. Sam, you're saying Chloe, the dog, has been investigated and rehomed to another state after 7 years with this family. Can't find her now. Yeah, this Dr. Crosby guy is supposedly saying he went and visited her or something. How do you know it's the same dog? I wouldn't trust that. Sandy, you're saying Court TV showed Jen's testimony last year and Kerry's this year, and they're both exactly the same and both wrong. So they've been rehearsing everything. Okay, that's a great point. Buttercup, you wish I'd call AJ and Yannetti and give them your tips. Most attorneys don't want to receive help from other attorneys, and but Harry's mom, that's a good point. Do you think Carrie's now understands how Jen McCabe set her up? I don't know. I think that they've probably become good buds during this time frame now. They probably talk all the time. So I think Jen would have made Carrie her one of her new best friends. Salem, you're saying what's going on in Canton is legitimately diabolical with so many people lying. Yeah, we're just on day 2. Unreal. There's something behind the fact that the judge called Roberts McCabe. Yeah, so the judge denied any connection with the McCabes, but McCabe's really sure seemed to be on her mind, right? She had that slip today. Sam, you're saying Hank is disorganized. Kelly, you're saying he's horrible, boring, dry, and robotic. Brit Chick, you're saying Allie McCabe and Colin supposedly found a stray dog in the snow that they took to Canton PD. What if that dog was Chloe? That could be the case. Lon, let you're saying that the prosecutors can use video clips. Can the defense as well? Well, the prosecution can call cops, but the defense can't. So in a normal trial, you could, but not in this court. Who knows? Monitoring, you're saying a criminal indictment unlikely to do it for insurance lacking conviction and the rest. Okay. Sandy, wasn't it Julie Nagel that suddenly after 3 years she thinks she saw something in the yard? Yeah, I think that was the case. Here, I'm coming across your comments on Brennan. Constant Landers, you're saying witnesses now get hostile and ask attorneys questions in this particular court. Is that the norm? I think maybe you see more of that nowadays across courts in America, where people are sort of they don't respect authority, so they don't mind pushing back and being flippant like that. Ellie, you're saying Hank is emotionless and shallow. He tries to force emotion or sentiment, but it's obvious he's not actually passionate about justice in this case. Passionate prosecutors have a presence about them. I agree. The vibe he gives off is not one of justice, of having truth on your side. Sydney Edwards, you're asking if I think the judge. I don't want to. I want to be professional. I'm going to say the judge is biased. I mean, it's way more than biased. It's like There's an agenda to get a conviction, it looks like. An agenda to convict Karen Reed. And if you need an agenda and you need a judge to make these radical, outrageous rulings, then obviously they know that there's not enough to convict Karen Reed. If you have enough evidence to convict Karen Reed, why would you risk getting it busted on appeal, reversed on appeal, and dismissed? So that's why they know they're trying extra hard. Because think about the last trial, not a single juror, not even the alternates, thought that Karen Reed was guilty of second-degree murder. And what do they do this time? They go for it again. Is absolutely outrageous. Mandy, you're saying you need to get out of Massachusetts. Well, can you believe your property taxes are paying these guys to be filthy rich as public servants, quote unquote? Unbelievable. CM Lavelle, you're saying she could have zoomed with the ARCA men, just not making them come up in person. Yeah, I think what she's doing, I said this before. Look at some of my videotapes before. I said, I think this judge is and prosecutor is trying to basically wear these guys out, make this firm think, you know what, we don't want to get involved in this Karen Reed thing. We're just getting beat up, slandered, maligned. Our honorable firm is being dragged through the mud by these dirt bags up in Massachusetts. A desire for civil discourse. Thank you. You're saying unless you should have to say, Your Honor, the Commonwealth is welcome to question them in voir dire, like Dr. Russell and our other experts, while we haven't been permitted to voir dire any Commonwealth experts. Yeah, called the judge out on all of her extreme anti-defense rulings. I think there was one expert that they got to voir dire, though. I think that was I can't remember which one that was. I think there was one that they got to do a voir dire on, but the judges is so much against defense. It's you just don't see it that blatant in any place in America like you do here. Okay, hold on a second. I'm gonna pull up an email. I'm gonna show you document 683, order for production of records. All right, let's see. Here we go. Check this out. Order for production of records. Dated the 22nd. So the court hereby orders Dr. Daniel Wolf and Dr. Andrew Renchler, ARCA witnesses, to produce the following: all records within ARCA or its owners' partners or employees or representatives possession, custody, or control in whatever format kept that reflect in any way or relate to work performed or contemplated or related in any way to billing, payment, compensation, and or reimbursement of any kind in connection with Commonwealth v. Karen Reed. Such records must be produced to Norfolk Superior Court by April 25th at 9 a.m. This order includes, by way of example, but not limitation, all correspondence via regular mail, email, text message, and or encoded message between the above entities and individuals with any third parties. The order also includes all reports and or draft reports, as well as all test results, photographs, video or audio recordings, charts, graphs, and calculations, recorded observations, or all test experiments undertaken, whether the results were included in a report or not. Wow, this is like so radical, just going for every kind of minutia to find something to trip these guys up on. This order also includes all records related to time spent on the case, including timesheets and drafts and final bills. Wow. To the extent that any record responsive to this order is kept in electronic format, the ARCA witness shall bring with them the appropriate hardware, equipped with appropriate software to allow the court access to such records at voir dire hearing. This judge, this is complete, absolute. I don't know. I can't tell you how insulting this is to see a court that stoops to this low level to try to go after these honorable witnesses and to make it look like they got something shady going on, and these witnesses have an agenda to conceal anything, that this is just a fishing expedition to find a technicality to get them bounced from being witnesses. That's all this is. Harass them, harangue them, and just drag their name through the mud. This is an absolute shameful. Yeah, it's actually shameful and disgusting. So absolute corruption between the prosecution and the and this court. Absolute corruption. Yeah, ARCA had 3 years to produce records that the Commonwealth failed to pursue in 3 years. Yeah, okay. 3 days, I mean, to produce something that the Commonwealth could have had for 3 years. Yeah, the Canton cartel, that's a good one. Deborah Claire, you're saying pretty sure Brian Albert covered him, hoping to blame this plow driver. Christine, ARCA will be prepared. They're at top in their field. That doesn't happen because they're incompetent. They will have a copy of every correspondence they're allowed to disclose for the court. Yeah, but you know what? If she finds something that the defense didn't disclose that they have, so she's just wanting to find information that she can then blame the defense team for, oh, hey, you missed this one email. This is a very egregious, you failed to comply with Rule 14 or civil discovery, and therefore none of these witnesses are going to testify. So that's what this corrupt game is all about. Long Light, you're saying could the defense also use clips from Karen's interviews since the prosecution does, or will she have to testify? Well, it's interesting because statements of the opposing party can be brought in, but you can't bring your own statements in unless you want to maybe argue it under the rule of completeness or something, but normally that wouldn't come in. But I would just argue that they have to present more of a broader band of video if they want to bring in any video, or instead of these 10-second snapshots. Justin, you're saying, why are the video clips allowed when no one's on stand? Well, it's actually what I do the same thing as a defense attorney. I would say, look, we'll stipulate this. You don't have to call the person that was a cameraman and bring in the authentication of this being a videotape that you made of Karen Reed. And so they're just helping get this before a jury and not trying to drag this out. So it's a smart move by the defense. I don't agree with the move of having her testify or be interviewed. That's not a good move in my book. Sam, you're saying I don't want anyone to pay me. That's true. I've never on this channel. I've never once asked to sub for a sub. I've never asked to like me. No subscription I've ever asked for. I had most of this time I've had super chats and that kind of thing turned off. I I got noticed from YouTube about how algorithms are increased through if you allow super chats. So the super chats are there, folks, but I don't need your money. So anyway, just keep that in mind. So I heard never mind, I'll pass on that comment. Lady D, how can a witness forget a call at 5 a.m. saying John O'Keefe is dead? Really, that statement is impossible to forget. Yeah, bringing in two potted plants. Kerry followed Karen to John's house. How did she not say something about Karen's taillight? Yeah, she never said anything to the police that night. So, if she said all this stuff about, hey, Karen saying maybe I hit him and all that kinds of, well, why didn't you tell the police that night? Okay, with this, I'm gonna take one more question and we'll call it a night or morning, or depending where you're at. Justice, you're saying, do I think the defense isn't objecting because they want the jury to see the state as trying to manipulate them? I don't know why they don't object more. That's one of the things I do. I don't try to object too much, but there's certain things I'd object to, and I'll be objecting more to these videotapes, the ones that don't come across as good for Karen, like this consciousness of guilt thing. That sounds pretty ridiculous. All right, so with that, my gosh, I'm way behind on questions. All right, so I'll take one more question here. Buttercup, what do I think of Peggy O'Keefe on the stand? Yeah, she's yeah, I don't want to say a whole lot about that. I just think that I thought it was strange that Brendan asked her how long she'd been married. She said too long, and you heard some snickering in the courtroom. I just thought that was really odd. But I'm just gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna say anything against her. I think it's fine that the defense didn't question her at all. I think that's like say a real classy, smart move. So with that, I'll try to come back tomorrow night. I don't plan on doing a whole live stream tomorrow during the day, but I may do some live streams for the entire day here and there, depending on which witness. So more to follow, but I'm definitely gonna try to cover this case every night at least. And like I say, sometimes during the day, do live streams for some of the day or all the day. So we'll just play it by ear and which particular witnesses are testifying. So thanks for your focus on the justice. If you do want to support the reads, there are different ways you can support them financially. So this is a true meat grinder that they're in, and just think if you don't have the money to go up against this constitution crushing machine of Morrissey and the judge, then you know, we got to try to help them out, folks. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say good night. Have a good day or night, and I'll see you back tomorrow. Thanks.